The Tennessee Titans are going to have their roster cut down to 53 players by 3 p.m. Central Standard Time this upcoming Tuesday, August 26th. So here's my final projection for the offense, defense, and special teams based on all the intel and insight I've gathered throughout training camp. Starting with the quarterback room, we're keeping two of these guys. Obviously, Cam Ward is number one. Brandon Allen is number two. Now, Cam is the most locked player in the history of roster locks, and behind him, the Titans will keep, I think, one backup on the active roster. That's going to be Brandon Allen on cutdown day, but I wouldn't rule out finding a better option before opening day if the right situation presents itself. Quarterback Trevor Siemian could wind up on Tennessee's practice squad. In the running back room, I think they'll keep four: Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears, Khalil Mullings, and Julius Chestnut. Tony Pollard and a currently hurt Tajay Spears are, of course, locks, and rookie sixth-round draft pick Khalil Mullings is a lock as well. He's going to play a lot of short yardage goal line looks. Because Spears is hurt, I feel very confident that Julius Chestnut is going to be running back 4 on the initial roster, and he's likely to handle any pass protection assignments that Tony Pollard doesn't, as Khalil Mullings is still proving to the staff that he won't get Cam Ward killed back there. Chestnut's also a useful special teamer. Jordan Mims is the running back I have pegged to potentially take a practice squad spot. If you're part of the Tennessee faithful, you know just how many years the Titans have shaved off your life with the emotional roller coaster of sports. Or maybe the roller coaster of life is messing with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals. The new year is a blank space for you to write a new story. BetterHelp makes it easier to get started. They are our incredible sponsor for this video. Regardless, if you have a clinical mental health issue like depression or anxiety, or if you're just a human going through a hard time, therapy can give you the tools you need to approach your life in a very different way. That's where our sponsor, BetterHelp, comes into play. BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and more accessible. And this is an important mission because finding a therapist can be really hard, especially when you're limited to the options in your area. Easily switch therapists anytime at no extra cost if it's not the right fit. BetterHelp's platform makes finding a therapist easier because it's online and remote. BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. Plus, with our link, you get 10% off your first month. Start fresh any day of the year with BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or go to betterhelp.com/ATOZ sports and get 10% off your first month of therapy with BetterHelp. Next, we go to the wide receiver room where I have them keeping 7 players: Calvin Ridley, Tyler Lockett, Alec Iamaner, Van Jefferson, Chimere Dike, Bryce Oliver, and James Prochet. The latitude in this room is 6 or 7 receivers, with the top 6 absolutely locked into place. No, Van Jefferson is not at risk of being cut. The only real question here is whether James Prochet gets retained as wide receiver 7. And though the math on the rest of the roster might make it a little bit tricky, I frankly don't see how they can afford not to keep him at this point. Because either Prochet's this team's punt returner and must be on the roster and active on game days, or they've really screwed up in preparation for that role. Because the only 2 other players in that competition receiving reps in camp are Jaquan Jackson and Chimere Dike. Now, Jackson has no shot of making this active roster, and Dike has been held out of taking too many reps at returner so that he can focus on other offensive and special teams duties so far. When I asked special teams coordinator John Fossil this past week whether he'd feel comfortable with Dike's preparedness to be the week 1 punt returner, he flat out said no. Hence, Prochet, or another return specialist from the waiver wire, has to make this team as wide receiver 7. His coaches believe he's earned a spot in camp with his impressive play at receiver. The only rub here is roster math with other position groups. As for fan favorite Xavier Restrepo, the Titans masses will panic for a matter of hours after he is cut, and then I think all will be well when he lands softly on the practice squad. I think Mason Kinsey stands to join him there, per the usual arrangement. In the tight end room, we're keeping 3 guys: Chigakonkwo, Gunnar Helm, and David Martin Robinson. Now, I think the latitude on the number kept in this room is either 3 or 4 before Tajay Spears got hurt. But now he's hurt, and I think that forced a 4th running back into the equation. So while I won't completely rule out tight end 4 making this team purely for special teams purposes, I feel pretty strongly that they'll stick with these 3 locks. Thomas Odukoya and Josh Wiley could potentially land on the practice squad. Now the offensive line to round out the offensive side of the ball, keeping 9 guys. Your starting 5 from left to right are Dan Moore, Peter Skoronski, Lloyd Cushenberry, Kevin Zeitler, and J.C. Latham. Number 6 is Corey Levin, who's been filling in at center and will if Lloyd Cushenberry is not ready to start week 1. Blake Hance, Jackson Slater, And number 9 is the only question mark here. I'm going with John Ojukwu. Now, the latitude in the offensive line room is either 9 or 10 big fellas. We got the first 5 from left to right. That's the starting offensive line when they're healthy. Corey Levin, who might have to start for a week or two, depending on Cushenberry. Rookie Jackson Slater, certainly making the team as an interior player. They're stashing him to potentially take over a starting role next year. And then there's Blake Hance, who is this team's Swiss Army knife backup. They're comfortable with him surviving at 4 different positions across the line and could be a perfectly acceptable guard for a stretch if called upon. The 9th spot will either belong to offensive tackle John Ojukwu or Oli Udoh. I went with Ojukwu in this projection due to familiarity and his strengths. See, Ojukwu is a quick-footed, high-motor, sound blocking technique guy. And without a traditional blocking Y tight end on this roster, which is what Thomas Odukoya's archetype would have been if he made this team, Ojukwu gives you a guy to bring in as a bonus lineman on jumbo packages. He was used in that role often last season. Now, Oli Udoh is kind of the opposite. Farm strong anchor, so really different from Ojukwu in a lot of ways. The team's been impressed with him as a swing tackle option this month, and for what it's worth, he's who they sent in for a few snaps in the Atlanta preseason game when left tackle Dan Moore briefly came out. If I'm wrong about one of these spots, it's going to be because Ojukwu is swapped out for Oli Udoh. And the team would really like to keep both of them as tackle options if they can find a way to fit 10 linemen, but that seems like some unlikely roster math. One last nugget. How's this for burying the lead? Don't shoot the messenger on this. It's just what I've been told. Offensive tackle Jalen Duncan is not going to make this roster, but he could attract some trade attention. Believe it or not, teams across the league are really, really desperate for tackles, and his frame and college pedigree all fit the bill. So he could land on the Titans practice squad, or maybe he's dealt for some very low-level capital. Then there's UDFA rookie Brandon Crenshaw-Dixon, the young gun out of Florida. He feels like the only lock practice squad player on this entire roster. There isn't room for him on the active, but in August, he's really impressed everybody. All I hear are really good things from the front office, from the coaches. They're really pleased with his development so far. They see a future for him here in Tennessee, and perhaps he's earning the swing tackle spot this time next year. Finally, you can never rule out stalwart Andrew Rupchich from sticking around in some capacity. The team really trusts him as a backup interior option. Now to the defensive side of the ball. We've got Jeffrey Simmons on the defensive line with Tavondre Sweat and Sebastian Joseph Day. And then the 4th and 5th guys they'll keep, I think, are James Lynch and Carlos Watkins. Let me begin by saying that the defensive side of this roster prediction is a whole lot harder than the offensive side. That's primarily because, frankly, the depth on this side of the fence is pretty brutal. Of the 25 offensive players I included in my final prediction, 21 of them are roster locks. Of the 25 defensive players we're about to talk about here, only 16 of them are locks. That means by my count, 9 defensive roster spots are pretty replaceable. And there are 4 spots that I would consider placeholders, like guys that the front office is actively going to look to replace. Whoever fills those spots is probably the hardest thing to project on this roster, but I'm not sure it really matters. I think that the waiver wire will replace them one way or another. So in the defensive line room, Simmons, Sweat, and Joseph Day, they're your no-brainer locks, right? They're your starters in an odd man front. James Lynch, he played pretty honorably in 2024 and has endeared himself to this staff. I expect him to make the team as defensive lineman 4, though he could theoretically be replaced. And then Carlos Watkins probably sticks around initially as well, though I think they'll probably actively look for a viable defensive lineman that brings them some depth on the waiver wire. If I'm wrong about defensive lineman 5, or they end up keeping a defensive lineman 6, keep an eye on rookie UDFA Cam Horsley. He's had himself a good camp, and they seem to see a role for him. He'll end up on the practice squad at least, and I think fellow rookie UDFA Isaiah Rakes was playing well enough to join him before he got hurt last week. On to the edge rushers, kind of rough here. Draymond Jones, Arden Key, Femi Oladejo, Jihad Ward, and Ali Gay. Now, outside of the Titans' top 3 edges, I see everybody as replaceable here. Jihad Ward was added in the middle of August, and Ali Gay is quite the useful special teamer, but doesn't bring a ton as a rusher. I think they end up keeping 5 in this room, but I won't buy who the depth is until we see what it looks like on opening day. They need upgrades here somehow, some way. Now, Gay would make a nice special teamer if he's cut, and Desmond Evans is the other player I could see them keeping on the practice squad, so keep an eye on those 2 to stick around in some capacity. The linebackers, I've got them keeping just 4. Cody Barton, Cedric Gray, James Williams, and Curtis Jacobs makes that fourth spot. Now, all four of the placeholder spots on the 53-man roster, if you've been following along at home, they are in the defensive box, with this last one being linebacker 4. I think the latitude in this room is 4 or 5 linebackers on the initial roster, but I'm predicting they'll just keep 4. The reality of this room for a couple weeks now has been Cody Barton, Cedric Gray, James Williams, and then a bunch of roster churn. Nobody competing for that 4th or 5th linebacker spot seems to be anything more than a special teams impact right now. I think Curtis Jacobs is who ends up getting the initial nod from that group competing for linebacker 4, but I could see them liking newly acquired Brian Asamoah as well. This is one of the positions on the projection I feel the least confident about. I almost just put reader's choice in that spot when I wrote the article, but where's the fun in that, right? So please just know it's how I feel. Either Jacobs or Asamoah or maybe somebody else could make good practice squad additions should they fail to make the roster, and I don't know who's going to get that 4th spot. It's a spot that I definitely think they'll comb the waiver wire for. At cornerback, L'Jarius Sneed, Jarvis Brownlee Jr., Roger McCreary, Marcus Harris, Darrell Baker Jr., and Gabe Jeudy-Lally make up the 6 that I think they keep in this room. Now, I count 4 locks in the cornerback room, the 3 starters and rookie 6th-round draft pick Marcus Harris. Harris has come along nicely the past couple weeks, which is fantastic news for the Titans, a secondary that desperately needs depth. Darrell Baker Jr. has been the presumed backup option behind L'Jarius Sneed for some time after playing a lot in his stead last season, but he's waned near the end of camp, and while I do expect him to make this team, I can't quite call him a lock any longer. Then there's cornerback 6, which is a position I'm not even sure they'll keep on the initial roster. If they do keep 6, though, I think second-year UDFA Gabe Jeudy-Lally is going to get the nod. He's been the direct backup to Roger McCreary in the slot this month, and I thought he played pretty well in Atlanta. He could be a roster math casualty in the end, though, in which case I'd expect him to land on the practice squad. I also think it's dealer's choice between the 3 UDFA rookies in this room who've shown flashes in camp when it comes to practice squad picks. So that's Clarence Lewis, Jamari Harris, or Davian Ross, who could all end up getting that call. At safety, I've got him keeping 5. Amani Hooker, Xavier Woods, Quandre Diggs, Kevin Winston Jr., and Mike Brown. This is a position I think you'll see some serious disagreement on amongst those of us who cover the team. Particularly, what do you make of Quandre Diggs standing on this roster? Some think he's just around as a public tryout or as a favor to check up on his little cousin Cam Ward before landing with another team in an elevated role. Diggs was a starter last year before getting hurt, after all. He was really important to this team, and once Kevin Winston Jr. gets back up to speed, that means Diggs probably falls to safety 4 on the depth chart. But clearly, I do not think he's going anywhere. Diggs was brought in as Winston insurance once they shut him down for ACL recovery management, and that's why I have Diggs ahead of Winston on the depth chart for the time being. This will change once Winston comes back and gets going because he's the future at this position in Tennessee. But in the meantime, Diggs is going to be really useful. And as one coach put it to me this month, safeties always get hurt. Diggs' presence keeps the team from being one injury away from meaningful reps from players primarily on the roster to play special teams. Mike Brown is one such player who I will expect to make this roster for his usefulness as the personal protector on the punt team, amongst other roles. And then behind him, Kendall Brooks, Julius Woods, those are guys that could end up on the practice squad. Finally, the specialists, long snapper Morgan Cox, kicker Joey Sly, and punter Johnny Hecker are going to make the roster. Morgan Cox is not going anywhere, but I don't think Sly or Hecker are either. I'm not going to rule it out just yet, especially at the kicking position. I'm going to keep a keen eye on the losers of some active kicking competitions around the league next week. I believe the Titans are going to be doing the same. For A to Z Sports Nashville, I'm Easton Freeze.